Welcome to the Adventures of Alice and Bob, the podcast where we get root access to the people shaping the world of cybersecurity to find out a little bit about their journey, the events that have helped shape their career, and maybe there's things that still keep them up at night. And in the case of today's guest, I mean that very literally, as Brandon Mertz has not only ended up responding to incidents, but he's done that for 2 days straight with no sleep. So he's had a few more sleepless nights than most. And when he isn't burning the midnight oil doing incident response, Brandon's made a career out of finding vulnerabilities that a lot of other people miss. As a security researcher, penetration tester, and bug bounty hunter, he's uncovered critical flaws in some of the most security-conscious organizations in the world, from major banks to healthcare providers to cutting-edge AI platforms. As the founder of Mursec and a member of Bug Bounty's Hacker Advisory Board, he's a top-ranked researcher who's discovered everything from complete bank account takeover vulnerabilities through open banking APIs to finding exploits in IBM mainframes that could fabricate funds at will. His physical security assessments are no less impressive, as they've had him wading through snow behind healthcare facilities and playing real-world games of hide-and-seek in server racks for many an hour. And at 6'3", that's not an easy task. And it's not just hiding out in data centers. Brandon also appears on TV, helping major companies communicate security risks and threats to the general public. As you might expect from that intro, we've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let's dive straight in. Brandon, welcome to podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you've done a better job at all the facts than I actually could ever recite, so thank you for that.
Well, we like to do our research here and make sure we've got it covered. So you're welcome to take that intro and use it wherever you like.
Thank you very much.
Let's get started with where your journey began. So where did you first become interested in technology and IT?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was very much bred from probably the age of 9 or 10 when I first started PC gaming, and the building blocks were I started playing a game called World of Warcraft. If you're familiar with that.
Oh yes, I've heard many people lost many a year to that game.
Yeah, it's bad, mate. It's really bad. That's where it all started, and I sort of had a PC, but it wasn't great, and there was this unyielding resolve to try and figure out exactly how is this working, why does this component improve this aspect of gaming, or why does this work the way it does, and it slowly snowballed into there. And throughout school, I started getting very much into cybersecurity somehow, and that was sort of like my North Star from the age of 13. If ever you asked me what I wanted to do career-wise throughout school, it was always cybersecurity or be a hacker. And from there, I then dropped out of college after 3 days and got an apprenticeship and started my career at age 16 on the blue team, and then shifted to the red team shortly after that.
So in those early days of kind of being at school, knowing you had this sort of thing in your mind that you wanted to be into cybersecurity, what were some of the ways you were learning about the tradecraft out there and learning about things? Because it can be a challenging thing to get stuck into at first.
Yeah, I feel like the mental fog around trying to grasp cybersecurity when you literally are a beginner. Like my experience was building a computer, so not much expertise to tap into. It very much felt like drinking from a hose. There's always something to look at, always something else coming out. And it was quite overwhelming to begin with, but where it actually started, and some listeners might remember this, I think it was called Hack This Site. And that was like my first encounter and first run-in with anything like that. And then after that, I felt like I needed some fundamentals, and I started Python very early on, back when it was like Python 2 something, and then slowly built up from there. But yeah, it was a intense thing to try and grasp that young, especially without any experience to tap into.
Yeah, and landing straight into, did you say you were in the blue team in your first apprenticeship role at 16 there?
Yeah, I've got some funny stories about that, but yeah, it was a blue team, like sysadmin, infrastructure analyst role.
And how did you land that role at such a young age? I know, apprenticeships try and match you up with a vendor, but it sounds like in terms of your career trajectory, even at a young age, you landed really on your feet with that first role.
Yeah, I did. I actually originally went in for that as a developer, and it was like a .NET developer. In hindsight, I'm very, very grateful that didn't happen.
You had a lucky escape, yeah.
Yeah, very lucky escape. And I think in the interview was what done it. There's a few candidates, and I remember I had spent so much money and so much resource on building home labs and like breaking things, tearing things down, building things up. I think I just bored them to death in the interview in a good way with the amount of stuff I'd done. And from there on, that's when they offered it. And obviously at 16, you're very eager, you're very keen, and you're hungry to learn and show off a little bit to show people what you can do.
And I'm interested actually at that kind of age when you've got so much enthusiasm and, like you say, wanting to maybe show off a little bit. Did things work out well in those first few years? Were there some challenges there? I was talking to one of our guests last week who, on his first day, managed to knock the client offline his first day responding to a ticket in a SOC, and he took a global financial services company offline for 8 hours because he blocked the wrong IP. Did you have any disasters early on? Were there some hard lessons learnt there?
Oh man, I had so many, and I will forever appreciate the team for putting up with me. So to begin with, I was 16 and I was a domain admin. So that's like yeah, I know, right? This- yeah, I think one of the funniest ones that comes to mind was I was working from home one day doing some routine maintenance, and I was sys prepping a virtual machine to transfer it over to another host, and or maybe even convert it to a physical device. I can't remember exactly. So I'm RDP'd into the hypervisor, and I'm using like keyboard shortcuts, and I run sysprep, and I lose connection to the hypervisor, and I'm thinking, that's a bit strange. I wonder what happened there. It must be my connection. It wasn't my connection. And then going through the troubleshooting, can I ping it? Is it up? Is it resolving? And then the realization hit me. I actually sysprepped the hypervisor and took down the hypervisor rather than the virtual machine, which was hosting like 400 to 500 instances for developers, websites, test environments, like customer environments. So yeah, that was one of them ones where I couldn't do anything about it. I was working from home, so I had to call my manager, and he had to physically visit the server room for me and fix that. But yeah, that was one of those ones when you think, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, it's those interesting scenarios where you can be just that. I remember when I used to do digital forensics and the kind of thing of like, oh, we'll just use DD to image this, but they would always refer to DD as disk destroyer because if you got the command the wrong way around, you were just wiping the wrong thing. So there are definitely some hard learned lessons. And were there any particular people who were early mentors in that career path that kind of set you on the right track there?
Yeah, absolutely. All my managers really. I have 3 managers: Jason, Ash, and Danny. And they were all very supportive. I think when I first got started, I immediately started the very traditional certificate grind. So by I think 17, I had the CompTIA A plus and Net plus, or maybe when I was 16. Then I got the Security plus. Then I done my CCNA in Cyber Ops, and it sort of forever snowballed down that path really. So they were very good mentors. They supported me throughout that, even throughout the mistakes I made, and they were really good people.
Yeah, and before we start jumping into some of the stories from your career, as part of that career I mentioned in the start, you've worked a lot in blue teaming roles, but you've also gone into doing your own bug bounty programs, getting involved in all those kind of things. How did kind of that part of things emerge for you?
Yeah, the bug bounty aspect.
Yeah, how did you get into going out doing the bug bounties and move away from kind of the traditional blue teaming activities?
Yeah, so it started really when I got my first red team pen test role, and bug bounty was always on my radar. And I had a lot of friends that done it, and it's sort of like a good way to sharpen the tools, make some additional money, and have some fun with your friends as well if you collab. And I was always a bit scared of it to begin with because I wasn't traditionally a good web app tester. I was like an infrastructure guy, so I preferred doing network based stuff. Um, and shortly after that completely changed. And I originally tried bug bounty when I was maybe 2 months into pen testing ish. And yeah, it didn't go well at all. It really did not go well. And that sort of put me off. And then full circle moment, I just completed the Offensive Security OSWE, which is a 48-hour exam, very intense, code review in 4 different languages, building out full exploit chains. And I looked at like my career checklist, and the only thing that I hadn't done, literally the only thing I hadn't done, was have a good run in bug bounty. And that's how that started. I was like, right, this is the last thing I'm doing. This is what I'm going for. And yeah, here we are. Almost 2 years later now.
Fantastic. And the career checklist, I like the idea of being that organized in your life and having a clear plan. What was it that you'd set out to do there? What age was it you'd written a career checklist and set off on that task?
I think it actually started when I was 16. I set myself the goal to be a pen tester by the time I was like 25, and I'd done it when I was 19. And I was sort of like, I always, as a person, I need this very much guiding North Star. I need to be working, focusing on something, leveling up myself or leveling up, whether it's in certificates or technical skills. I just have to do that. I'm very bad at sitting around and relaxing. I really mentally can't deal with that quite well. So it's very much a personal trait that, okay, I've done this, time to rest for a week, and now on to the next thing. What can I be doing next to either improve myself, my skill set, my business, and things like that?
And, what do you, I'm guessing that, you consider the blue teaming and the red teaming, and they all complement each other, right? You've got an understanding of things from both sides there, but, what do you consider yourself to be? We talk about purple teamers now, and we talk about security researchers and all kinds of things. Where would you place yourself?
Yeah, I would right now, currently speaking, on the 11th of December this year, I would say bug bounty hunter. I'm having a lot of fun doing that. I would say it's what I spend the most time on at the moment, um, and having the most fun doing as well, interacting with some of the most mature and biggest teams, traveling internationally a lot to some of these very extravagant locations and offices, collaborating with some great hackers, and yeah, having a lot of fun.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty fantastic place to be at. So congratulations on getting that to that place in your career.
Thank you very much.
And I think I heard you say on another interview that you think you believe you take kind of a little bit of a different approach when it comes to red teaming or thinking about, bug bounties and finding exploits. Could you maybe talk us through, how you think about focusing on a target?
Yeah, absolutely. So with bug bounty, a lot of the hunters that I was watching or interacted with or looked at, and even my first bug bounty mentor, who I'll talk shortly about, there wasn't much structure to the hunt. It's sort of like, okay, I'll look at this because this is cool. Okay, this takes my fancy. And when I started hunting, I was working crazy hours to try and make ends meet. I just joined the Critical Thinking podcast as a writer. I had a full-time job, and I was also trying to hunt. And I couldn't do this like, okay, this looks cool. Let's go over here and wander around on a target. I needed structure. I needed like a very good methodology to allow me to pick up a target and look at it again. Might be a week later, it could be 4 days later. And the way I've done that is through threat modeling and a very unique note-taking system. So I use Notion, for example. There's actually a video on the Critical Thinking podcast channel on YouTube about my note-taking methodology. And essentially, I threat modeled the target both in sector, and by that I mean, what sector does this target operate in that has a unique threat model? Is it a finance app? Is it a SaaS app? Is it insurance? Like, what unique threat model does it have from a sector perspective? Then I go a step further and go, okay, let's look at the frameworks, integrations, JavaScript libraries that it uses. Then I threat model those and go, what's unique to these? Does it use Ruby? Does it use GraphQL? Like those sort of questions. And then the layer below that is I threat model the actual functionality. So, for example, I might just use an app for like a week solid as a normal user, unlocking absolutely everything, taking notes on behavior, taking notes on gadgets, which is interesting behaviors which aren't necessarily a vulnerability, but they could be useful in a wider attack scenario, and just doing that for a week. The idea is I have this giant living list the idea is it's never finished. It's always something I can come back to and something I add to, of the threat model of the target, which integrates all of those points I just mentioned and gives me like a never ending list of attack vectors to try to allow me to get creative on the target, to allow me to go deep on the target, and to allow me to find some really creative bugs on the target as well.
I think that's a wonderful approach, because I know different people have very different approaches, and some people just have their niche and they immediately look for that one thing that they know a lot about and dive into straight hammering that. And like you say, some people just dive straight in and start basically throwing things at the wall. But I like your kind of more methodical approach to actually, let's look at the bigger picture and things that are interesting about the application, and things that make it different in terms of the landscape that it sits in. So that's a really interesting approach, and having that approach actually in your career seems to have paid some real dividends. So I know one of the examples was you were working, I think this was a red teaming assessment rather than a bug bounty, but you were looking for a fintech payment processor, and you saw this unusual activity. And this is in kind of UK challenger banks. So if people aren't familiar, you've got your traditional banks, which people think of as, very rigid and kind of very sealed ecosystems. But then we've got this thing in the UK and the EU around open banking APIs, where it's making banks into flexible platforms that allows other fintechs and challenger banks to connect systems, deliver data better, deliver more diverse financial services that benefit the consumer that are out there. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you became involved in looking into those connections between banks and what you found there?
Hmm. Yeah. So to clarify, that was actually my first run-in with bug bounty. So with my friend and mentor, Justin Gardner, aka Rhinerator, we sat down when I was first getting into bug bounty. We had a look at some targets about what would be a good fit from a region perspective and what I enjoy hacking. And this one target came up. Naturally, I can't mention the name, um, which was a UK bank. And I was like, right, you know what? If I can hack this as my first target, I can hack pretty much anything going forward in bug bounty. That was the mindset I adopted. So started looking at this target, and I was like, okay, there's some really interesting things here. There's been a lot of questions I've had around like my own banking app that I use when, for example, you can now send people messages or an emoji when they send you a payment. And I'm like, why? Like, is that necessary? And two, how is it implemented, more importantly? So I started going down this route of just trying to understand the app, just really trying to get into the weeds, why this functionality exists, why this ecosystem exists, and more importantly, what the open banking API is. And I started looking at the open banking API and noticed some discrepancies in the specification versus the implementation on some of these banks, like my own bank, the target I was looking at. And then this sent me down this wild journey of actually creating 8 different bank accounts across different providers. Yeah, fun. To try and piece together some parser discrepancies across all these different providers. That was bred from finding a potential vectors to account takeover on the bug bounty target I was looking at. To cut a long story short, 8 different bank accounts. I managed to find, I think it's 2 providers I could have used to send a payload within some metadata within a payment to the bug bounty target. And the impact of that was I send a payment of a penny. You click it thinking, who's Brandon? Why is he sending me a penny? And when you click that payment, I get account takeover and take over your bank account. So very impactful, quite a good finding. Took a long time to get there, but I also learned a lot about the open banking API. And a funny side note here, when I was doing all this, I was mapping out the payment flows for like how payments are handled UK to UK, UK to EU, and also international to UK. And I was getting my friend Justin, who I mentioned, to send me payments abroad so I could test some things, which I won't get into. And I was actually getting chased by fraud teams at one point, like, where is this person? Why are they sending you £10? And that was fun. But after explaining about the bug bounty program and things like that, it was okay. But yeah, it was an interesting one. And I got some really good findings off the back of that as well.
So from that kind of initial, again, this is an interesting thing with the way you'd approached it, right? You'd looked at it, you'd kind of done this mind map of the attack vectors, emojis had triggered your attention, and kind of these things then just led you down this path that eventually discovered a full-on account takeover at this banking provider in the UK. Fantastic. Yeah, and did the the bug bounty program, was it well managed at the bank you're reporting it to? Did they deal with it immediately and quickly and understand the full ramifications, or was it a bit more of a slow process there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I built a really good relationship with the team. I even jumped on a call with them as well, which is very uncommon in bug bounty unless you find something mega crazy, or you're interacting with a team that really does care. So I built a great relationship with them. I had multiple findings as well, which were also quite severe. Um, and yeah, off the back of that, it was really nice to see. I actually spoke at Black Hat this week, um, describing some of the process that happened. And it was nice to see because the team actually made developer training off the back of my findings, and we're using it to train developers of, okay, this is how not to do things, and this is how you should handle your inputs, and this is what you should do. And that's not something you get to see very often in bug bounty, I've learned now. So that was really nice to see, to have like a very positive impact on an organization, and feel like you're actually helping actual users as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you've been flagged by fraud teams for suspicious transactions constantly coming in and out as you were looking at this traffic. And obviously, it was a bug bounty program for a particular bank you were looking at, but you'd had to set up 8 different accounts. Were those with that particular provider, or did you have to set them up with other providers and then kind of very carefully manage what you were actually testing against in relation to bounty program and kind of where those lines you shouldn't cross were?
Exactly that. It was the latter. So it was being very careful because obviously not everyone has a bug bounty program, and sort of understanding not to cross those boundaries and those lines. And if even checking if, okay, they might not have a hosted bug bounty program, but do they have like a security.txt? Do they have a vulnerability disclosure process, and looking at things like that as well? So you're absolutely right. There's a line there which you can't cross, and I operated within that, which actually was appreciated by the teams as well. Eventually, once I like, articulated everything.
Yeah, and I assume having the detailed note-taking process that you have also helps communicate and reassure people you've gone through all the steps right, and again, gives them that confidence in you as someone they can partner with to do further research.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So yeah, I had some good war stories from it, but at the time I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. Let's hope the team respond well, and they did.
Yeah, well, I like the fact you kind of did the thing that you seem to do very well in your career of setting yourself a target and making that happen, manifesting that. So that's a great start to a bug bounty career there. Now, we mentioned at the start that it hasn't always been, you know, the most relaxing of careers that you've had. You've had things where you've ended up staying awake for 2 days responding to an incident. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what it was like getting a call at 11 o'clock at night around an incident with a domain controller. Again, you said at the very start at 16, you were a domain admin, you had that kind of pressure and stress. The worst thing you want to do is get a call about the domain controller. So talk us through what happened in that incident.
Yeah, so I will start by saying when I was in a full blue team capacity, I did work a number of incidents. I was at an MSP, so by nature of that, you're operating in a lot. But this one was actually when I was an internal team member, and I'll set the scene. I've just got into bed. It's what 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I can hear my phone going off, and I look at it, and it's one of my managers, and I knew straight away. I was like, there is absolutely no reason for them to be calling me at this time, um, other than whatever I think it is. So I answered the phone, and yeah, strange activity being seen from the domain controller. They've done X, Y, and Z. Will you be able to come online and have a look? So I was like, yeah, okay, give me 20, come online. And little did I know at that time, that was going to be the start of a very long 2 days, and longer actually for like instant containment, DR, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'm just trying to piece together the timeline on that, but it was could have been an extinction level event, I'd say, in terms of it's the worst that you absolutely don't want happening when you're anyone really on the receiving side. Um, but yeah, it's a good war story. So we didn't know exactly the initial IOC at the time, which is why there's so many alarm bells. We were just seeing this activity on the domain controller, and it was like, oh, that's like almost a post-exploitation activity that we're witnessing right now. How can we retrace the steps, and how can we go backwards to figure this out? It wasn't until it might have been on the second day. It's kind of weird. My concept of time is very non-existent because I had to wait for so long. I think it was on the second day where we managed to piece together from a few log sources that it was in fact a IOC from a old VPN user service account, I believe it was, on an old appliance, which wasn't even, I think it wasn't even the active appliance. It was like the failover appliance. Um, and yeah, we managed to figure that out through very sparse log sources. But when you're working an incident, people that have worked an incident will understand this. But you are in this process of trying to piece together what happened. And when you're trying to piece together what happened, you're uncovering new things that you didn't know existed. So you need to be like very strict and remind yourself like, okay, that does need to be fixed at some point, but that's not what the objective is right now. And trying to coordinate that across hundreds of people, key stakeholders, can get quite messy.
And I believe one of the kind of key threats was the attackers had got onto domain controller and managed to grab NTDS.dit. So effectively that gives them the user accounts, the hashes, the group memberships, the computer, like it gives them the domain effectively. So that was the extinction level risk in the organization, was it?
Exactly that. And when you're dealing with something like that, you have to rotate your Kerberos tickets twice, not once. And what that means is on the interim, you'll have every single account unavailable or locked out for a short time and password reset. So, I mean, we've all worked in like IT or a domain environment. You have or can have tens of thousands of accounts, computer accounts, service accounts that just are there and they don't cause a problem. So no one really does much with them and they're just existing. But then when something like this happens, you realize, okay, is there going to be impact? Is there going to be consequence if from what I'm doing? Is it going to cause availability? Do I have to contact any key stakeholders to make sure they're aware? How do we properly verify what the business impact is going to be here? And yeah, that's just its own topic in and itself, which is a very, very big area to like understand. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack and digest in an instant, I'd say.
Yeah, and when you're at that stage, you're obviously nobody's staring away for 2 days because you are battling to get everything under control. There's Kerberos tickets rotated, make sure all that is done before the attackers decide to. Do you ever get an idea of what they were intending to do? Deploy ransomware, steal information? Did they ever get that far, or did you manage to stay ahead of them?
That's a funny thing. I was always expecting something to happen, or seeing pivots and things like that to really go after an objective, or at least see some kind of activity and behavior that would align with like either an APT or like your common sort of behaviors that you see from when you're interacting or when you're being interacted with by a threat actor. But it was very strange because it sort of seemed like it could have been automated in some senses. And could have been like if I had to put my money on it, was an initial access broker and they just didn't have the bid or they hadn't listed it yet or they didn't have a buyer at that time. So fortunate for me and fortunate for the team, really.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've got listeners who are thinking, oh, damn, I've probably got some legacy service accounts that have highly privileged access in my domain kicking around a dormant that we haven't used for a long time and don't have visibility of those that we want to do. What would you say to people who are thinking, oh, okay, that could happen to us? What should they think about in terms of defending their Active Directory there?
Yeah, I would say there's no silver bullet. There's no universal advice that would fit for every organization. I feel like you have a lot to take into context as an organization when you start to look at these things, because now traditionally, like your domain and attack surface would all be on-prem. Now you can have like split brains. It can be hosted here, there, and everywhere. So what I would say is understand your organization's risk, your budget, get your pen test done, whether that's for compliance or your yearly due diligence, and really try and figure out and articulate what your risk appetite is, where that sits compared to your budget, and work with teams and communicate that with stakeholders and make sure that you are operating within your risk appetite, within your budget, and doing the best you can. Because until you've worked an incident, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we have to do that at some point, but there's so many other things we need to do. It's like car insurance, right? When you have to pay a yearly thing, you think, oh, here we go. But then when you have a crash, you're very happy that you did have your insurance. So it's one of those where it's never going to feel nice or rewarding when you're doing the work. It's only when something goes wrong, you're happy that you have done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the thing I always say is, security debt is silent debt. Nobody's upset about it until something goes wrong, and then suddenly everyone's very upset. And especially in those situations where, service accounts and taking over the DC, to the kind of tiered administration models, privilege access management, least privilege postures are kind of the thing I always talk to organizations about, really focusing on there to reduce that risk as much as possible, reduce that blast radius in the event that one of those accounts is compromised. So a lot of challenges out there. VPNs are holding on forever and still causing lots of problems in 2025. So still got a little way to go to clear that mess out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a huge attack surface. There's so much coming out. I think Watchtower just released some new .NET deserialization research as well, which also had a consequence of hitting a few appliance providers. So it's constant. You sort of have to be prepared for it now. Everyone's going after them.
So I'm going to continue building the audience's illusion that you're going to be the next James Bond here. You've got the British accent, you're a good-looking guy, you've got these technical skills, and it's not just on the computer. You've done the physical pen testing side of things as well, even starting an assessment against a US healthcare provider from the UK. So tell us about how remote reconnaissance turned into wading through the snow.
Yeah, well, that was a wild one. I think I was only 20 or 21 at the time on this particular assessment. But it done leaps and bounds for like my personal character development and just not getting socially awkward or anything like that, which is hilarious. But an assessment comes in and they want a physical assessment of, I think it was 5 different locations based in the US. I won't give too much away because people could put 2 and 2 together. And it very much starts off with, okay, right, let's see what we can find out about the locations online. Let's see what we can find out about the people online, the management team. Let's see where their networks are hosted. You're doing everything from scratch, right? You're uncovering everything, like traditional OSINT. And throughout this process, I had noted some of the internet service providers, some of the hosting providers, and documented their internal hierarchy of like key IT stakeholders, cybersecurity people, sysadmins, those kind of things. So unfortunately, we didn't really find any in an ideal world, you find like a building schematic or like something like a blueprint, like anything like that. Nothing. We found nothing. So we spent the first couple of days on site when we did get over to the US, just doing recon of the buildings and just watching, seeing what happened, and just doing your traditional, again, in-person OSINT, but from a building perspective. And that's when it occurred to me that I'm probably gonna have to be more prepared in the sense that I might have to do some actual social engineering and try and convince these people, but we'll see what happens. So I'll fast forward. As a backup, I forged a identity card, which I still have lying around here somewhere, from the ISP, stole the branding from online, made it look very legit, had a little plastic holder, things like that. Now, that's pretty much one of the only things I have to go on site with. And I'm around the back of the building. I get out for the day of the assessment to try and get a feel, try and do some tailgating and things like that. Within about 10 to 15 seconds of getting out the vehicle, security have already come up to me and gone, "What are you doing here?" why are you here? And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a long day now. So I get taken through to the reception, and they're questioning me, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? Why am I here? Blah, 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 all these things. And that's when I start name dropping. And as part of the OSIM, I sent like some dummy emails out to some of their key stakeholders, see if I could get a response, see what their email signatures look like. You don't really know what you're going to need until you need it. So I try to be prepared. And one of the IT managers was on holiday for like a very long time. Like he wasn't returning anytime soon. So I basically name dropped and said, I'm here to see X's name. And one of the guys went, okay, let me try and contact him for you. Waiting for about 30, 40 minutes. And I'm inside having a look around, looking at some of the Wi-Fi networks, seeing if anything's open. And he goes, right, sorry, this person's on holiday, as I knew. But we've got one of the associates here for you to see. What do you need to do? And I'm like, right, I'm here to do some network maintenance. I'm from your ISP. We've had reports of this, trying to build the picture and be authentic. And the guy's like, right, okay, let's I'll escort you around. Let's see what you need to do. So we're going around this building, and unluckily the server room was literally underground, like underground, like really underground. And I was trying to retrace my steps and remember how to get from the main lobby to the server room. Didn't go very well. And I managed to get into the server room. I social engineered my way into the server room. And I'm looking around and I'm like, right, I'm just going to start doing some diagnostics. And I had this little it was a Raspberry Pi in a fancy case, basically. And it was a CNC to beacon home to my manager, Jordan, JDK, so he could take over and do the other part. And just as I'm about to plug it in, he's like, do not touch anything until I've verified. I know who you are, what you're here to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm already in the server room, but whatever. Anyway, we've been here for like an hour and it's not going anywhere. And I had to pull I'm really sorry. I've got a bit of an upset stomach. Could you show me to the toilet just to try and get out of the situation to give me some maneuverability? Because I sort of burnt everything that I had. So I go upstairs and find out where the toilet is. And I'm just literally sat on top of the toilet with my rucksack on, like, so no one can see where I am. And I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to do this? The server room's underground. You need key fobs to get into it. One of the doors was locked. Like, what's my plan here? And I was just sat for about 20 minutes, get up, go out, and I'm like, right, let's just try and do it. Almost threw the towel in early. And when I went outside, the guy wasn't there. He actually must have got distracted or had a call to take or something like that. So I'm like, right, okay, that's my advantage. I'm going to use some more time. Go back in, sit on the toilet, like literally sat on top of the toilet so no one could see my feet or anything with all this, with the rucksack on. I'm thinking, right, I need to do something here. And I don't know what. So I open the door. Second time I do it, there's now a whole like security detail looking around on the walkie-talkies. And I'm thinking, that's probably for me. Fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to see. And I waited for them to go. And as part of the early reconnaissance, before I actually tried to enter the building, there was actually one part of the building, which I didn't know was connected, that had some maintenance and building work happening on. So I dart out of one of the exits that I clocked when I was going to the server room, and I dart to them to try and talk to some of the builders and try and see if the builders had access to some of the maintenance they're doing. Anyway, managed to speak social engineer or say I was actually an employee and I was here to try and get through. The builders obviously don't care. They're just there to do their job. They really don't mind. And retrace the steps, managed to evade the security detail. And I got to the server room and I was like, right, okay, now what? And I go to start feeling the panels on the ceiling to try and push one through and then try and climb over or find at least an entry point to see. And by some complete act of God, in the commotion of us leaving, the server room door never got locked on the way out. And I tried to start climbing first, and I was like, actually, did he lock the door? I can't remember, and just opened the door. So managed to get in, and I could hear a lot of noise and commotion outside. I'm not sure if it's the building or if it's the security detail. So I had to like find half a server rack, which wasn't full, and like fit inside the server rack, close the door, find something to plug the device in, and get going on that. And yeah, it was a bit of a wild one, but it managed to complete the assessment that got the compromise. The customer was happy with the objectives and what we done. A bit of luck involved, I will admit, but it did go very far with the body language and understanding, okay, why does someone think someone's authoritative, or learning to pick up on cues and someone's not as confident in what you're saying and things like that as well. So it was like a whole journey of personal development and a really good assessment as well.
I mean, that's probably quite a rapid set of personal development there that you experience. That takes a lot of confidence to do, and I'm guessing that the British accent didn't hurt either for confusing people a little bit.
That's a very, very good point. I don't know what it is, but when you're overseas, especially in America, you're like immediately authenticated. If you speak with the British accent for no reason at all, you're just like, there's more trust, and I'm not sure why, but it definitely helped in this case.
Yeah, I read some research once that something about the British accent to an American ear, they assume you're like 20% more intelligent than you actually are. There's some weird research, like when people are trying to judge by accent and they assumed a British accent, you were automatically given a level of like trust and intelligence above probably what we should definitely have.
Oh, I agree. It's crazy. I would love to find the psychology out behind it, because it has like, is it through like advertisement? Is like, why is it from films? Like, why is that the general conceived perspective? I don't know, but it works. That's all I know.
And I've got to ask, you were crammed yourself into half a server rack at 6'3". I had managed to get this thing plugged in. How did you get out of there again? Was it just a case of exit as fast as you can from nearest exit?
Yeah, so I did think that I actually locked myself in the server rack, like accidentally, by closing it as well at one point, but I managed to unlatch it from inside. But once I plugged it in, so the device was powered on, it was beaconing back, it's very much a case of, so thanks to the builders, walk straight out of like the builders area and not go anywhere near the main bit that I initially walked in on. So I was very lucky that day. I will admit, if I went at any other time when the building maintenance was happening, I definitely would not have got in, I don't think, at all. So very opportunistic, I'd say.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always the thing, isn't there, that as the red team or an attacker, you just have to be right once. You just have to get lucky once. So even though there was that element of luck involved in you getting in there, that doesn't mean that an attacker wouldn't have had exactly the same elements of luck and the same things would have conspired to ultimately get them through to the same objectives. So I think it's still a fair assessment there, like you say. I think even though there was that element of luck involved, it's takes the skill and the opportunities that are available because of the controls that are in place.
Exactly. And I would say, in terms of like a toolkit, we went in a bit blind, because we weren't sure what is permitted versus what's denied when you fly overseas. Like, what if you get picked by TSA of like a lockpick kit in your exactly. Like, I personally didn't want to risk it, because that would be a very long day. You already get questioned within an inch of your life going over to the States anyway. So I personally didn't want to question it. So I did go in with a very minimal toolkit, I'd say.
Yeah. And, you've done lots of assessments over the years, and on-site assessments aren't always quite that dramatic. Sometimes it's just a simple case of logging onto the guest Wi-Fi network, I believe, and suddenly you find your way through a system. So can you talk us a little bit about how a public guest Wi-Fi leads you to a banking mainframe?
Yeah. So this was another good assessment me and my friend Jordan done. We worked together on it, and it was for a private bank in the UK. And it started off like all assessments when we both got drops in the internal network. It was an internal test along with Wi-Fi, and just having a poke around and seeing what was around and what was there. I took the Wi-Fi assessment on, and a very common misconfiguration with the with the Wi-Fi portals is enabling or having your admin interfaces accessible from the guests network. And I was just playing around. I didn't know what to expect at the time, and I was mapping it out, and I was like, okay, the admin interface is accessible. Next test, let's see what word lists work on this, if any. It was like admin and admin something. It was a default config accessible. So I was like, okay, so what is this actually connected to, this access point? I'm still very much mapping this out. It was like one of those quick wins you have in the assessment, and you're like, okay, that's nice. Let's get going on this. And it was actually connected, another misconfiguration. It was connected to the wider network through one of its WAN interfaces. So we had an in to the network, technically speaking, from a public or a public Wi-Fi point. So that was like the first part of the chain, which was quite nice. So noted it down. It was a finding in itself. Now we started poking around on the internal network, and we were seeing a lot of devices that we didn't have a lot of coverage to historically, and a lot of like weird services that we're trying to map and didn't quite know what we were looking at. And we started off by compromising a few sets of credentials in one network segment. Then we started crawling things like file shares and getting another set of credentials through sensitive documents and files and other things, and like deployment scripts and good stuff like that. And then it got to a point where we were looking at a couple of these hosts when we pivoted through another segment. And we were just like, we're going to have to ask the team here. We don't want to take anything down. We don't really know what these services are and what we're looking at. And then one of the IT guys come over. Then the IT guy got another IT guy. And then that guy got like the older IT guy. And he was like, yeah, that's one of the mainframes. We're like, mainframes? I was like, what are you talking about, mainframes?
So these are probably possibly older than you, Brandon.
Yeah, they were absolutely older than me. And this was my first run-in and with like this technology. And to cut a long story short, it was actually like the banking IBM Q something mainframes. That's actually like the lifeline of the bank, where literally like transactional funds are stored for the entire bank, along with bank accounts and things like that. So we're like, right, that is a cool thing to hit. Let's try and understand this a little bit more. And we were mapping out all these very arcane and archaic services that I didn't have much exposure to at the time, and mapping these out. And we thought, right, okay, let's just understand what auth happens on these services and try and author them with some of the many, many sets of credentials we've harvested from the rest of the assessment, because we harvested credentials and then obviously started dumping things locally and then creating these big word lists to try and get an idea of the entire domain. And we actually got a hit on one account, and we got the guy over and we were like, right, we've authenticated to this. We sort of want to have fun, but we don't want to cause any availability issues for you. Like, what did this service do on here? And he was like, yeah, that's like one of the management interfaces. And if you do this, and if you do that, and if you do this, you can like essentially manage the funds for the entire bank. And we're like, wow. So let's take a step back and look at this attack chain. So you now have an attack scenario where someone can join your public Wi-Fi. They can access the public Wi-Fi's admin interface. They can pivot from that to one of the WAN interfaces to the internal network. They can then go from the internal network, harvest some sets of credentials through, it was like in one segment, you could do like LLMNR and all poisoning and things like that. And essentially build out this very nice attack chain where you could go from public Wi-Fi access to actually pwning the mainframe responsible for like the lifeline of the bank that controlled the funds. So you could transfer to anywhere, like any amount of money essentially, which was quite fun. And there's this thing is like, but what I don't understand is the credentials you've harvested and the hit that you got isn't my credential for this system. Is like, so how is that working? And this was a head scratcher for like 2 days on site. But anyway, it figures out the service we were interacting with was so old, I forget what it was. The maximum password length was like 7 characters. And the first 7 characters of the password that we harvested was his password for this service. But obviously the rest of the password wasn't. So again, another stroke of luck where you had the first 7 characters actually was his password, but we didn't input the first 7 characters. The service just dropped the rest because it didn't actually support anything longer, which was quite funny. So yeah, it was a bit of a wild one.
I mean, you say it's a stroke of luck, but it also shows that there was some commonality to the passwords being used across the bank there in terms of different users and accounts. Yeah.
Exactly that. So yeah, that was another one of those ones where there's been things in my my hacking career overall, actually, and just general cybersecurity over the last 11, 12 years, where I'm like, that doesn't feel like it should be possible. And as a consumer, I don't like that is technically possible. But here we are. It is possible. And I'd rather it be me finding this than someone else.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there's an interesting thing there from the consumer's perspective. And I think a lot of people assume that banks, especially, I mentioned at the start, they're kind of seen as these like fortresses, and people assume they invest huge amounts in cyber and they've got the latest and greatest technology. And actually, sometimes, and we've seen this, it's not just banks, government institutions, the Office of People Management in the US was hit a while back. And you could see in the logs, the attackers were trying to work out how to code in, I think it was Fortran at the time. And it's because the systems are actually so legacy that it's almost like security through obscurity with some of these things that people get access to them. And like yourself, you were like, what is this? What is this technology that predates me? How does this even work? Why is it only 7 characters? What do you think people should think about when they're looking at these institutions that they fundamentally trust? Do you think they should worry more?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Like even through my bug bounty career now, I've had findings and collabed with things where I've just been like, that is horrific. Like this is horrific to know that this is possible. So I would say that unfortunately, every organization has an attack surface. Every organization has risk. Every organization has shadow IT or just unknown things that are running through the nature of people getting new jobs, through the nature of things leaving, through services being deprecated, through like failed projects or unneeded projects. It's very much the nature of the beast. And just about with enough time, anything, I'm very much in a mindset now, with enough time and knowledge, pretty much anything can get popped eventually, unfortunately, anything. If you follow Pwne, for example, or what those guys do, that's very much like a living and very obvious case of that, of like things being hacked in ways that just scary.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, we're almost out of time here today, but I'd love you to tell people about, the Critical Thinking podcast, where they can find out more about what you're up to and kind of follow the journey that you're on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Critical Thinking Bug Bounty podcast is the biggest podcast for the bug bounty space. It's very technical. It's very in-depth. We break down some of the more advanced web app, AI, API, mobile exploits and concepts, new browser behaviors, new CVEs, things like that, and package it up in a way that's meant for your pen tester or your hands-on keyboard person who does want to get hands-on and do some exploitation. So if that interests you, definitely check out the Critical Thinking Bug Bounty podcast. I'm now a co-host on there. In terms of personal development and personal journey, best place is LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll see a lot of me on LinkedIn, and there's soon to be a blog as well, which is coming out at brandonmertz.com. Other than that, you've also got Mursec.com, Murtasec.com for my company as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be sure to include links to as much of that as we can in the description for this podcast. So if you're interested in learning more, just click on those links below. And before we leave you today, you mentioned that you've had these lists of aspirations of things that you want to get done. What's next on your list?
I'm currently in the process of crafting my hit list of targets I want to hit for next year. They're bug bounty programs, and get some really creative, impactful findings. So I'm crafting the hit list is all I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure it's an impressive hit list, given that you started that with a UK bank there. So things can only get better, as they say. So really pleased to hear that's on the list, and wonderful to see what you get up to in the next year or so with hitting those targets.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time today for on the Adventures of Alice and Bob. A huge thanks to our guest today, Brandon Mertz, for sharing some of his incredible journey from those, in-person pen testing experiences of locking himself in server racks to navigating through Wi-Fi to systems older than him to find out he's taken over the complete financial transactions of the bank and possibly in 2026 becoming the next candidate for the James Bond franchise. As always, thanks to super producer Jesse and the team at Beyond Trust who make this podcast happen. I'm James Maud, and this has been The Adventures of Alice and Bob.
Thank you for listening to The Adventures of Alice and Bob. Do you have any stories from the cybersecurity trenches that would make our listeners' jaws drop? If so, we would love to have you on the podcast. Maybe you faced down a ransomware attack with nothing but coffee and determination, discovered a breach in the most unexpected way, or had a pen test go horribly wrong. Whatever your tale, funny, harrowing, or just plain wild, we want to feature you on the show. To share your cybersecurity war stories, email us at booking@merchantsmedia.com.